Matt Dalkey, I believe you have the first unanswered question. Could you please unmute yourself, and if you're comfortable, show your video, and please repeat your question that's at the chat.
Yeah, it wasn't a question so much. It was just pointing out that here in the lower mainland of BC, we're actually seeing some usage of lighter colored pavements for some of the effects that Tim was just talking about in terms of lighting reduction for certain applications such as tunnels.
That's good information. So I think the next question we have from Henrik. Henrik, if you're still on.
Why don't we just open it up to whoever wants to ask a question? Oh, sorry. If there's somebody else. Just unmute yourself and ask a question if anybody has a question.
Yeah, the question was just about the pavement design life and the durability and how that affects the maintenance impacts, if that was taken into account.
Sure, at least I can answer that in the work that we've done. And that is, yeah, we looked at the impact of different design lives and also of different analysis periods. So the tricky part that I think that people don't appreciate is that when you do one of these life cycle assessments, just like Tim and Shane alluded to, there's really some engineering that goes into it. And also in particular, to make sure you're comparing functionally equivalent alternatives. So I think that's often one of the biggest challenges of doing these LCAs. It's hard to get alignment on that, particularly when you have so much uncertainty about what's going to happen in a pavement. So the short answer is we've looked at different variations of that, and what we do in our LCAs is account for uncertainty in that as well, because it's important. But usually what some people do is also just end up looking at a bunch of different scenarios as well.
I hope that question was answered, Henrik. I think the next one we have in the chat. So just a heads up, when the questions run out from the chat, I will be opening it up to the floor. Petros, if you're still on, if you could ask your question. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Petros. Just take the video on here. So my question was, so Tim just, can you hear me okay? Yep.
No, yes.
Yep. So Tim at the end just mentioned, just had a slide there about pervious concrete. I was just wondering if there are any case studies in BC or the rest of Canada for using pervious concrete for highway pavements.
You wouldn't use, right now, the pervious concrete is actually utilized in parking lots, laneway areas that don't have as much traffic. There is some studies going on underway right now because it's such a high void ratio. It doesn't have the same strength as a conventional concrete. There is some studies going on to make a stronger pervious concrete, which means the stronger you make it, the less pervious it's going to be. So as you decrease the permeability, you're going to decrease the ability of the water to flow through the pavement structure. But there is studies ongoing for utilizing it in heavier traffic areas. But at this time, most of the applications that I know of are either parking lots. They're in the States, they use them as shoulders on the shoulder areas. They're laneway areas where they'll put part of the laneway with the pervious on both sides, in between the driving areas. So there's a lot of different applications. Sidewalks they've been used as, but not heavy traffic areas that you'd see on the highways.
And maybe just a brief follow-up as well. Any thoughts on when it seems like the construction industry is very slow, understandably, to take on to implement new technologies.
Yes.
And I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on ways to maybe tackle that, whether we need to engage with the clients, the contractors, the designers, to implement new technologies. For example, my research was on self-healing concrete, which is I think has a lot of potential, but I think it'll probably be maybe 40, 50 years until it's really kind of takes off.
Well, we hope not, because you're getting into a bit of the nanotechnology, and we hope that is something that people will start looking at much more carefully. But yeah, the only thing is kind of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. If no one's willing to try the product, then there's not going to be a lot of contractors that can do it. But once there is a desire to try the new technologies, do the test sites that people are doing, there's a number of installations in Ontario that you have Pervious Concrete. But it's a matter of people willing to take that, try the technology, and see the performance that they can get out of the technology. I think architects are certainly people that should be considering it as an infrastructure around their buildings.
I would just add to that. I think what we'd like to see as an industry is just a little more faith put into the code standards that apply to cement and concrete that are put together at the Canadian Standards Association level. What we often find is we develop a new technology, go through a lot of testing to get a product like Portland limestone cement through the CSA standards, and then there's a lot of reluctance beyond that, talking to transportation authorities to get them comfortable with something that has already gone through its due diligence on testing. So definitely speaks to that issue.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you both very much.
Welcome. Thank you.
Ken, I think a portion of your question has been answered. Ken, do you have any follow-up questions before I move on to the next?
Thank you. It was just to emphasize the challenges. I work with the Cement Association, the challenges I think that we've seen with GHG benefits of building materials like concrete being recognized by the transportation authorities. And I think Jeremy spoke to some of these issues very early on. Again, just a question as to whether Tim or Shane or Jeremy would add anything further to that. Thank you.
I guess I would just, my comment on that would be, and oftentimes it's just left up to the Ministry of Environment to be the solution to all things climate change and carbon reductions, when in fact, it's the Ministries of Infrastructure and Transportation that are building things that need to take these built environment considerations into consideration and measure the effects of the materials that they're specifying and procuring, and have greenhouse gas reductions as a target as part of their building design objectives.
I think the other thing that I want to add to that, though, is just that, it's a really good point. It shouldn't just be about the Ministry of Environment. The transportation ministries also should be involved because, as I mentioned, and Tim and Shane did as well, there's just huge opportunities for reductions when it comes to optimized designs and optimizing your design with your maintenance and rehabilitation schedules. And that really has little to do with, sort of low carbon materials. Of course, if you can lower those embodied impacts, that's great. But optimizing designs can have even greater implications. And so usually when I interact with transportation agencies, they say, oh, yeah, we do sustainable pavements because look at all this recycled content that we use. And that's great, but they don't, I think, really get this idea of how much opportunities there are in taking that life cycle perspective. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
Yeah, and making sure that people understand that you don't have to have a prescriptive specification, that you actually have a performance-based one, so that it allows the contractor or the concrete supplier to optimize the mix design, to utilize that supplementary cementing material in the mix to minimize that cement content. Because there's a lot of jurisdictions right now specify you have to have 300 and blank kilograms of cement, and that might give you a 40 MPa concrete when you only want 32 MPa, but they don't care. They want that X amount of cement in the mix. Where if you actually allow the industry to optimize that mix design to ensure that we can minimize our footprint and provide a quality concrete that meets all the requirements of CSA 823.1, then there will be no issue. And that's one of the things we run into is people aren't following CSA 823.1. They're following their own prescriptive specification, which we need to get away from if we're going to make inroads into reducing our carbon footprint overall.
Some really good discussion there. Alexandra, if you're still on, you can.
Hi, yeah, I'm still on, thank you. So thanks everyone for your presentation. I work in municipal government and infrastructure planning, so I've actually heard some of the answers to my question in just the recent discussion, but I'll still ask it, which is what steps do you consider that municipalities can take at a staff level to create meaningful incentives for this type of technology to be uptaken by our local industries? I do recognize that performance-based targets has been discussed, and optimization of designs and procurement practices. So
you've hit the nail on the head. The procurement practices has to be, you have to make sure that the specification actually allows GOL cement. You have to make sure that supplementary cementing materials are also allowed. Now, sometimes limits are put on the amount of supplementary cementing material, and that's not a bad thing. But if it's artificially low, it's not going to help you possibly meet your CO2 goals, reduction goals. So really having the performance-based specification where they have to meet the requirement of a specific strength and a specific Coulomb rating, or whatever your constraints are, that they can meet those and allow the supplier to provide an optimized mix design to meet those. Ensure that the design of your pavement is not over-designed. A lot of times I find when I'm looking at a concrete versus an asphalt option, the concrete design will be substantially over-designed compared to the asphalt design. And that's because people don't understand the concrete as well as they do the asphalt, of course, because there's way more asphalt. So it's dealing with engineering firms that understand the concrete designs. That certainly helps. Understanding, having architects that are willing to try new technologies, such as the Pervious Concrete in the paving areas around their building. It reduces the heat island effect, as well as helps you in your charging of the groundwater. If it's a type of soil that can actually take the water. There's a lot of things that you can do, and certainly as our association, we'd be willing to work with any municipality to help try change your specifications to be more performance-based.
And I guess my comment on that would just be to involve industry associations in that type of discussion. Certainly we represent the interests of our members, but at the end of the day, we're very aware of the best practices that are going on across North America and even Europe, and can bring some of those solutions to the table and demonstrate specifications that we would recommend to see implemented in Canada.
Yeah. We're not going to recommend a concrete if we don't think it'll work.
thank you so much.
All right, that's good. All right, that's great. I think I'd like to open it up to the floor now. If you do have a question, please unmute yourself and ask. I believe we still have Shane and Tim around for a little while longer.
Shoshanna is also on as well, if anyone has questions for her. I think there was a last question that was just typed out by Josh, but it was directed at Jeremy, but I don't know, Tim and Shane, if you're able to respond to that last question on the chat. It's relating to, what was it?
I don't think Josh is on yet, but I'll read out the question. What kind of project frameworks can owners use to guide the design and construction of horizontal infrastructure, which would mandate the need for LCAs to be conducted? So there's obviously LEED for buildings, which is sort of vertical infrastructure, if you will, but is there something equivalent for horizontal infrastructure or transportation infrastructure?
Well, there's something. under
Yeah, sorry.
development at present time with the National Research Council of Canada. They have their LCA Squared initiative, which is a 4-year research project that's going to ultimately develop a set of guidelines and tools for how to do an LCA for horizontal infrastructure. So it's about 3 years away from completion at this point in time. So it is on the horizon, but as of today, beyond the climate lens that the federal bilateral agreements have with the different provinces on projects about $10 million or more, that requires carbon to be measured as part of the projects that are receiving that funding, there is no requirement for LCAs in government procurement today, but it is something that we definitely advocate for. We're always promoting the use of a 3-screen approach, which is life cycle cost, life cycle carbon, and an assessment of best available solutions, which is the best practice we would recommend for government and private owner procurement.
And we believe too, it shouldn't just be focused on carbon. You need to look at the energy consumption. There's 7 different items when you're looking at an LCA that need to be looked at, and you don't want to focus on just one and make your decision on only one portion of an LCA. Plus, you actually have to look at all the other benefits of one type of product versus another. There's a matrix of things that you have to do. The states, I believe now, they have to go through LCCA processed for FHWA funding, and I believe they're moving towards an LCA having to be done as well. But I don't think that's the decision right now. I think they're moving towards it, which could possibly happen in Canada as well.
All right, that's good to know. I do hope we answered Josh's question. Alexandra, do you want to come on and ask that question, the follow-up question you had?
Yeah, sorry, I just noticed that Josh did mention Envision, which is provided as a framework through the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure, and I got my training through that, but I have not had the chance to use it yet, and I'm just wondering if anyone has experience with that and if you find that it meets some of these needs.
I have not used it, but I've heard of it, but I've never used it.
I think, unfortunately, we don't have the people who have used it or utilized it in any of their projects attending right now. Does anyone else have any other questions? If not, I think in another minute we'll be wrapping up the event.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Much appreciated. And
all right.
Keep safe.
Thanks for presenting.
Sure. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for hosting, and hope to see you guys soon.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Bye now.
Thank you.